In the spring of 1242, the most successful army in human history did something it had never done before. It stopped, it was not beaten, it was not surrounded. It had just spent a year erasing every force sent against it, and there was nothing left in front of it that could have held for a week, and then it turned around and rode home. To understand how strange that is, go back 1 year. In April 1241, two Mongol armies destroyed two European armies 2 days apart, several hundred miles from each other. At Legnica in Silesia, they broke a combined force under Duke Henry II of Poland. 2 days later, at Mohi in Hungary, they trapped the army of King Bela IV against a river and shattered it. Think about what that coordination means. Two separate campaigns, hundreds of miles apart, timed almost to the day, in an age when a message traveled at the speed of a horse. That was not luck. That was a military system Europe did not have an answer to. Hungary was the richest kingdom in Central Europe, and it took the Mongols a single afternoon to remove its army from the board. Bela fled west. The Mongols followed. They spent the winter in Hungary, and when the Danube froze around Christmas, they simply rode across it and kept going, chasing the king through Croatia and down to the Adriatic coast. He escaped onto an island, and then, in the spring, the whole army turned east and left. So what happened? The answer you will usually hear is that a man died. On the 11th of December 1241, Ogedei Khan, the son of Genghis and ruler of the whole empire, died in Mongolia. By Mongol custom, the princes of the family were expected to return for a Kuriltai, the great assembly that chose the next ruler, and the commander in Europe was Batu, Genghis's grandson, who had a very direct interest in who came next. It is a tidy explanation. It is also the one most historians still consider central. But push on it slightly and it starts to wobble. Batu never actually went back to Mongolia. He withdrew from Hungary, stopped on the steppe north of the Black Sea, and stayed there, building the state we call the Golden Horde. If the succession was the reason to leave, he did not follow through on it. And the timing is awkward. News of a death in Mongolia took months to reach the Danube. Peter Jackson, whose book on the Mongols in the West is the standard account in English, argues that the political explanation still holds up better than the alternatives, and also raises a possibility that changes the shape of the whole question. What if this was never meant to be a conquest? The Mongols demanded submission first and invaded second. A campaign that smashed armies, took plunder, and left could be exactly what it looked like from the inside. Not a failure, a raid. But there is a second explanation, and it is about grass. Denis Sinor, a Hungarian-born historian who spent decades studying the relationship between steppe armies and the land they rode across, made an argument that sounds mundane and is not. A Mongol warrior did not have a horse. He had several, often 4 or 5, so he could switch mounts and keep moving while the others recovered. Multiply that across an army and you are not moving soldiers, you are moving a herd of hundreds of thousands of grazing animals that must eat every single day. Now look at where they had stopped. The Hungarian plain is genuinely grassland, which is why the Mongols went there, but it is a small piece of grassland by steppe standards, and Sinor's argument was that it simply could not feed that many horses indefinitely. The army had ridden to the western edge of the world it could actually live in, and then in 2016, a study published in Scientific Reports by the tree-ring scientist Ulf Buntgen and the historian Nicola D. Cosmo added something the medieval chroniclers could not have measured. Tree rings record the weather of every year they grow through. The rings for 1242 in Central Europe point to a cold, wet spring. On the Hungarian plain, which sits low and drains badly, a wet spring does something specific. It turns pasture into marsh. Suddenly the grass is thin, the ground is soft, and the one thing that made this army unstoppable, the ability to move faster than anyone could react, is gone. The authors were careful with their claim. They did not say the weather drove the Mongols out. They said it may have made staying much harder, alongside everything else. Other historians, Jackson among them, remain unconvinced that the climate did much of the work at all. And underneath the debate, there were people living through it. A cleric called Rogerius was in Hungary when the Mongols arrived, was captured, and survived to write it down. His account describes what the year actually looked like from the ground, and the part that stays with you is not the battles, it is the food. The countryside was stripped. Peasants were put to work bringing in a harvest that was then taken. When the Mongols finally left, Hungary was hit by famine, because an army that size does not just kill people, it eats a kingdom. And here is where it turns. Bela IV came back to a wrecked country and drew a conclusion most rulers do not manage after that kind of defeat. He had lost in open battle, so he decided not to fight another one. He spent the following decades covering Hungary in stone castles and walled towns, and giving nobles land specifically to build more. It was expensive, slow, and unpopular. Then in 1285, the Mongols came back. This time, the field army did not have to save the kingdom because the kingdom no longer depended on it. The invaders moved through countryside they could not feed themselves from and hit fortifications they could not take, and this time it was they who left in worse shape than they arrived. Bela is remembered in Hungary as something close to a second founder of the state, and the thing he founded was a defensive system built by a man who had watched the alternative fail. So we are left with a death in Mongolia, a plain too small to feed the horses, a wet spring that turned it to mud, and an army that may have been raiding all along. Historians still argue about how much weight each of those carries, and honestly, they may all be true at once. What is certain is the shape of it. In the spring of 1242, the most successful army in human history did the one thing it had never done, and 8 centuries later we are still trying to work out why.